Kalalal Wadlaya Basham Yoshai Basham Kadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of great milestone that rule and teach well, peace and salutations to the brothers and the four corners of this earth, pushing this word in truth and in sincerity. Remember the Manatas asking Shalom. Alright, so here we have an article that I want to say I haven't read through it, but that is bringing some, I want to say, terrific news or speculations. I don't know, but it really brings joy to heart when you think about what we've been preaching about, what we learned from the elders coming on down, you know what I mean, our and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? The vision coming to pass. It really lifts your spirit in a way. It is reassure you, it's a very reassuring thing. That is what I'm looking for. Alright? So we get down into it. It's a could artificial intelligence and universal basic income eliminate meaningless jobs. Australia essentially did it during COVID. The world's richest man thinks it's inevitable, and a growing body of research suggests it could be the answer to all shattering long-held high rates of employment. To AI shattering, so okay, to AI shattering long-held high rates of employment. A universal basic income or UBI is a regular obligation-free payment to everyone. There are different models, but those key elements endure in research studies and pilot projects around the world. Creating a base that everyone can access with dollars is really important for a world where things are changing really rapidly, says Ben Spice Butcher, and where the kinds of risks people are exposed to are changing as well. The Associate Professor of Economy and Society at Macquarie University says the JobKeeper and coronavirus supplement received by millions during the pandemic shows we can create a payment that everyone is entitled to, which would let them live at least a decent basic life. You remember when Klaus Schwab say, "Oh, you'll own nothing and be happy," or you think you'll own nothing because they giving it or they loaning it. They say, "Yeah, use that by the time. Use that until we tell you not to use it again. Or use this until we say otherwise." Right? This is a form of control. You have to conform to what they want in order to get to reap these benefits, these rewards, so to speak, to have this basic income. Right? They now realize all the way down here in the article we see how they implementing it. Yet they say whether it could be digitally nothing. They're just talking about everybody could get paid. And this is what the stimulus checks was about. How stimulus check thing. This is what it was about, a trial run, all that whole C19 was a trial run. Not too long after I hear them talking about it having a, you know what I mean, it might have a next one and so on and so forth. So like, let's say, we've already had a UBI. The COVID pandemic showed us how society can function even in times of high unemployment if we support the community with regular payments so they can live. When COVID forced people to stay home, between 3.6 million and 4 million Australians were supported by the JobKeeper payment. In addition, a further 2.2 million people who received some form or welfare payment such as job seeker, colloquially called the dole, enjoyed a top-up payment called the coronavirus supplement that massively boosted, in most cases essentially doubled their income. At one point, more than 43% of the adult population was receiving a regular obligation-free payment from the government, with artificial intelligence threatening to shatter entire sectors and occupations. Is it time to talk about a universal basic income to secure a future? Global research finds UBI has benefit. Research before and after the pandemic has given us a better idea of the positive impact of a basic income. COVID showed us that how precocious the idea of employment is. Precarious work, yeah. The idea of employment is how shaky those foundations are. UBI proponent Elise Clean sees. The associate professor of public policy at the Crawford School at the Australian National University, says COVID provided what do you call it? A natural experiment. Yeah, but experiments don't happen naturally. Stupid of the impact of basic income. We found that poverty rates for folks that are receiving job seeker went from 67% down to 7. Wow, 7%, Associate Professor Clean says. The research Clean and her colleagues did found the income boost helped people prepare to enter the labor market. They were able to have their foot off their neck a bit and be able to engage in the labor market, she explains, to get out of debt, to meet basic needs, and of course make themselves feel good. It had huge psychological impacts that helped people feel that they had dignity again. The Stanford University Basic Income Lab has talked about 160 global UBI experiments in the last 4 decades. They range in their objective. They are focused on the number of people in the study and the value of the money they receive. The biggest one is actually Give Directly in Kenya. That's going for 12 years and it's working with 20,000 Kenyans over 200 villages, Clean says. Klein, whatever the fuck I want to pronounce, alright? Preliminary results from the study are really positive, that it's showing huge improvement in people's lives. The program, now operating in other African countries, found it decreased infant mortality and family violence while boosting consumption, spending, savings, and local economic activity. But the research doesn't convince everyone. I don't think it's been a fantastic 7 years for advocates of a UBI. 8 years ago, the ABC investigated the possibility of universal basic income as a response to a rise in automation and increasing computing power. At the time, the estimate to give everyone a payment at a level of the unemployment benefit, then called Newstart, was around 240 billion a year, at a time when the overall spend for the Australian government was about 450 billion. In the live example of COVID, the cost of JobKeeper wage subsidy was 88.9 billion. The coronavirus supplement cost more than 20 billion over most of 2020 and part of 2021. Even if more generous existing benefits such as the age and disability pensions were reduced to the level of a UBI, the net cost would still be huge. You would still have to find something like 170 to 190 billion annually in order to fund the scheme. Simon Cowan, research director at think tank the Center for Independent Studies, estimated at the view the experience of COVID pandemic has hardened it. It's probably confirmed some of my skepticism about UBI, he says now. Normally, superannuation is quarantined until people reach a certain age. Usually 65. Cowan points to the studies that show people who are allowed to withdraw super under emergency provisions in COVID spent it on gambling, alcohol, and takeaway food. People who got access to cash where there was no obligation connected to it when it wasn't earmarked for anything in particular, they spent it on leisure activities. A lot of people just spent it on things they gave them short-term benefit. He says, while acknowledging that some people paid down debt and that COVID confinement reduced people's ability to spend money outside the house. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but from the perspective of a policy reform, particularly an enormously expensive one, it's hard to imagine that there's a strong societal benefit. Uh, on the flip side, Cohen says studies in the US show benefits to cash payments like UBI, like a UBI. For example, there are some young mothers who, rather than going back into the workforce, are putting their kids into childcare. And putting their kids into childcare, they take access to that money and use that to stay home and spend more time with their kids. He observes students or potential students, some of those people will decide to stay at school or go to university rather than to go out and work. So they are in a benefit, and there is a benefit in terms of some of the reductions of those pressures. But in his view, none of this outweighs the potential cost. Immense billions of dollars would need to be raised from new forms of tax. Alright, I think that's as far as I read. Alright, so basically they're talking about AI eliminating humans and how they're subsidizing it with a UBI. Alright, and even the elder Apostle Ariamla brought out that on many occasions. Now everybody talks about, well, all GMS more or less talks about it. Alright, the Ecclesiastes 12 and 4. And the door shall be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low, sound of the work is low. And he shall rise up, right? And the voice of the bird and all the daughters of music shall be with no art. The grinding go below, so it wouldn't have work, right? There's a prophecy, it will not work. Doors will be shut in the streets. Nobody will need to work, right? However, what would happen? You would have to, this is where this whole social credit system comes into play. Watch what you say, watch what you post, watch what you view, right? Because of that social credit system, that would affect you. UBI, what you're able to spend it on, because everything will be what in a 15-minute city, which is constantly observed by, you know what I mean, AI that is programmed to say, hey, this is not up to regulation, this is against this, or whatever the case may be. This is in violation of this order or commitment or what have you, all right? And you'd have to conform to to what the elites want you to conform to in order to access it freely, really and truly. Right? Oh my goodness. Bear with my one moment. Bear with my one moment. Phone starting to glitch. My bad. Let's bear with my one moment.